It was just another loud, dusty day on the construction site, drills humming, concrete mixing, steel grinding. But in the middle of it all, one young guy stood out, a quiet, dark-haired worker who'd just gotten another rejection message on his phone. Despite all his skills, the company didn't have room for him. His name? Doesn't matter yet. What matters is this guy had been grinding nonstop, yet still couldn't catch a break. Right then, his coworker, the mouthy type, called him out, joking that he was just slacking off again. The guy brushed it off, acting cool, saying he'd finished his work. But there was more behind the fake smile. He'd been in this game since school, painting, lifting, surviving. And though he laughed it off, even joked about how his buddy couldn't remember anything after a drink, the cracks were showing. Up on the ladder, he pushed through, painting like it was nothing, even when a sharp jolt hit his back. He flinched. Tried to hide it. Said he was fine. But inside? His whole body was shaking. Painkillers were wearing off again. That injury from 6 months ago, lifting that cursed panel, it never healed. Just kept getting worse. As the sun dipped low, the shift ended. One of the senior workers pulled his buddy aside, asking why the kid was doing all the work. And yeah, his friend wasn't thrilled. Said the boss liked him too much. The boss didn't deny it, said the kid actually met his deadlines. Unlike the rest. When asked about his back, the guy gave the usual, "I'm fine." But he wasn't. And when offered a drink, he passed. Said he had to hit the hospital out of meds. On the cab ride, reality hit hard. He couldn't even work without those pills. And none of those desk job applications were landing. Not one. He knew his back couldn't handle this forever, but the bills weren't going to wait. At the hospital, one look from the doctor and the pain came flooding out physically and emotionally. Diagnosis? The disc was shot. No more heavy lifting. The doctor didn't sugarcoat it either. Reminded him of how his father died 13 years ago, falling on a job. That company vanished. The lawyers got them a payout, sure. But the trauma never left. Now history was threatening to repeat itself unless he stopped. But stopping meant starving. So he argued. Until the doctor snapped, told him not to come back if he wasn't ready to change. Then quietly, the doctor sent a money transfer. $2 million. Not for himself, for the guy's mother. Next stop, another hospital. His mother lay in bed, pale but calm. She tried to smile. Told him she was fine. But when she mentioned the money, his face twisted in confusion. He had no idea who sent it. She thought it was him. He thought maybe the boss or the doctor. But deep down, he knew he wasn't doing enough. She asked how work was. He lied, said it was easy. She didn't press. Just sighed, wishing she could help. But illness had tied her down. He told her to sleep, said he'd stay close. And she did, only after watching her son fall asleep first. She covered him gently, thinking about how much he reminded her of his father. Not just the smell of construction dust, but the stubborn heart too. She made a silent promise to herself. She'd fight through her illness. Because her son was carrying the weight of 2 lives. And she couldn't let him do it alone. Morning came. Back to work. Same site. Same dust. But this time something had shifted. Quietly, he returned the other books but held onto the ones filled with handwritten notes. Those he read through the night. When interview day finally came, he stood in front of his closet, hands hovering over his clothes. The system advised him, go classic. So he chose a neat suit and tried to steady his nerves. Today had to go right. Outside, the sun was shining, the kind of morning that almost tricks you into thinking everything's fine. At the bus stop, he pulled out one of the marked books and kept reading, ignoring the constant system pop-ups that seemed more annoying than useful. Even on the bus, he didn't stop flipping pages. When he arrived, someone from the company told him the interview was upstairs. But just as he started to head up, he caught whispers from behind, a man and a woman murmuring. He scored 98-61, the woman said. A solid score. The system flashed again, appearance assessment passed. He scoffed quietly. The interview said looks didn't matter, but clearly someone was watching everything. This wasn't just any company. Elsum Group had its hands in fashion, real estate, logistics, tourism. The scale was overwhelming. As the candidates entered the room, the pressure grew thick. Some looked ready to break. A woman named Kimberly introduced herself. She'd be testing their skills. A man named Connor would assist. They asked if anyone faced issues traveling here. That's when one girl raised her hand, bold move. She asked if the company would cover her travel expenses. Just like that, the system pinged again, eliminated. He smirked to himself. That kind of attitude? Instant red flag. Then came the real test. 200 questions in just 30 minutes. Time ticked fast. He questioned if finishing every question was necessary, but in the end, he gave it his best. After submitting the test, he met up with his construction crew. Steven, one of his work buddies, teased him for skipping work, figured maybe he had a girlfriend. Tony didn't explain. Telling them he was off for an interview would only stir drama. They'd think he was ditching them. Truth was, he'd grown attached to the crew. If it weren't for his back acting up, he might have stayed forever. Then the system popped up again. Another surprise, a special interview with the director. Tony rolled his eyes. Why him? But if he skipped it, he'd be reassigned to another site. No real choice. Later, while they were eating, Steven got a call from their boss, Kevin. He wanted to speak with Tony. No way to dodge that. When Tony showed up, Kevin was tense. He decided Tony would work as a carpenter starting tomorrow. Tony pushed back, asking why the sudden shift. Kevin snapped, said finding someone like him wasn't easy. Tony was tired. The yelling? Exhausting. The system chimed in again, new task unlocked. Listen to Kevin's full story. Tony sighed and told him to calm down. He'd listen. Kevin confessed, without a second carpenter, he was losing big money daily. He begged Tony to stay, even if just for a week. Tony didn't want to, but something in him softened. He agreed, 1 week, no more. Kevin was relieved, already calling the president to confirm the schedule. They'd finish in 7 days. That evening, the team asked how it went. Kevin said everything was on track. Then Steven returned with someone new. The man beside him introduced himself as Charlie, director of Elsam Group. Tony didn't even climb down from the ladder, just shook his hand and kept it casual. Charlie thanked him, worried about delays, but Tony only smiled. In his head, he thought, 1 week, that's it, my back's already screaming. Charlie invited him for drinks. Tony declined, said he had a meeting the next day. After work, he quietly left and headed straight to the hospital. To see his Uncle Hank. He didn't expect that answer, and it threw him for a second. Charlie turned to his colleagues, cracking a grin. The hard part was done. He handed the floor to them. Then came the real question, what could Tony bring to the company? Most would freeze, but not him. Tony kept it real. He didn't chase dreams of fame or big titles. He just wanted decent pay, less stress, enough to cover his mom's medical bills and eat without counting coins. That kind of freedom? Worth everything. He added one thing. As long as the job stayed within the law and basic decency, he was all in. The man pressed him, why draw that line? Tony didn't flinch. If the company gave shady orders, its future would crash. He wasn't just looking for a paycheck, he wanted to work somewhere that meant something. He knew it wasn't the perfect answer. But that was the point, there's no perfect answer in real life. It's about how you handle the pressure. Then came a curveball, did he have a girlfriend? Tony shrugged. No girlfriend. Just hadn't met someone yet. But if the right one came along, he was open to it. That cracked Charlie up. He told Tony he nailed the interview and it was done. Everyone could leave. Evening hit fast. Tony was back at the construction site. Steven spotted him and waved, surprised to see him working again. Something felt off though. Tony wanted to share, but their talk got cut short. John came stumbling in, tripped over a beam. Classic John. But Tony had bigger things on his mind. Steven invited him to dinner with the crew, but Tony had something else to do first. He wanted to talk to the boss. Everyone got curious, and then came the shock. Tony said this was his last week here. Right then, a task flashed from the system. Attend tonight's gathering, no reward, no penalty. Strange. He rolled with it anyway. Asked what was for dinner. Steven grinned, soup. Tony joked if there was beef, he might just defect to the manager's side. That sparked laughter. They arrived ready to eat and unwind. Steven opened up, it had been a tough week. Fewer people were getting into engineering. His own brother was a gas fitter, and after 20 years in the field, he didn't see the point in more school. It just didn't pay off. John joked that Steven was just old. But Tony didn't laugh, he respected how grounded Steven stayed, even drunk. Still, it hit hard, being technical staff wasn't easy. Science, tech, pharma, that's where the world was heading. Tony stared out the window, city lights glowing. A week passed. Then his boss called. Tony had skipped work. Tony said he'd asked for time off yesterday. The boss didn't want to work alone, begged him to come. But Tony shut it down and hung up. No guilt. Just then, a woman from the company came over. She said she'd escort him to the next interview, this time a group debate. The topic? High education costs in OECD countries like South Korea. This hit his nerves. You needed real-world experience to speak on this, and he was walking straight into it. The moderator laid out the rules. Raise your hand. State your number. Then speak. Tony got number 2. The debate kicked off. Number 3 started rambling about the economy and rising education costs, basically just repeating the question. Tony held back, watching. Smart move. Number 7 shared her story. Her parents spent a fortune on her schooling. She tied it to declining birth rates, arguing for higher family support. Number 3 agreed again. It sounded logical but missed the point. Tony knew it. This wasn't the company's fault. It wasn't even their job to fix it. So he stood, lifted his hand, and took a new angle. Their country had the highest education costs but shockingly low rankings. He went to the board. Broke it down. In Germany, education was mandatory. Here, it was optional after school. College, university, self-learning, it was up to the individual. And yet, their job market matched demand. Their average salary was higher than Korea's, with less inequality. Tony wasn't just answering a question, he was reframing the whole debate. The day wrapped up with a polite thank you to the participants. As the room cleared, he quietly noted Tony's name. Clearly, the guy had handled it well. But just as he stepped out, a loud voice broke the silence. A man was shouting, furious that he'd been unfairly kicked out. It was contestant number 10, still refusing to admit his mistakes. Typical. But then something strange happened. The examiner, the one being yelled at, was glowing, literally. A soft green light surrounded him. Tony blinked, confused. And when he looked around again, everyone's appearance had shifted. People were glowing in all sorts of colors: red, orange, green. Behind him, one woman had an orange glow, the man beside her a yellow one. Tony realized something important. His skill had activated again. He'd learned 2 new things. First, 3 rapid blinks triggered it. Second, everyone had their own aura, but maybe not based on age, like he first guessed. Still, he didn't have time to overthink it. Back at the construction site, his routine continued until a message lit up his screen. He'd made it. Passed the interview at Elson Group. Final round was tomorrow at 3 p.m. at HQ. Excited but focused, he knew he had to stay sharp and not mess this up. As he returned to work, he noticed John overloading paint on his roller. Trying to help, he gave a quick tip, but John didn't listen. 1 second later, a full splash of paint hit Tony square in the face. John scrambled down, apologizing like crazy. Tony was clearly annoyed but chose not to blow up. "It's not worth it," he said calmly. On his way to clean up, he ran into Stephen, the site supervisor, who suggested using the newly opened bath on the first floor. Tony hesitated, expecting judgment from other workers, but Stephen assured him it was arranged for everyone today. Reluctantly, Tony agreed. Once inside, he stripped off the soaked clothes and stepped into the hot water, letting the heat melt the tension. Then, in the middle of the room, he noticed a man already soaking. They got to chatting. Tony explained he was a construction worker, and the man, surprisingly laid back, guessed that paint-splattered labor wasn't easy. He turned out to be the boss of the bathhouse. Tony complimented the place and asked if the pay was good. The man smiled, saying he earned enough not to envy others. Just as things relaxed, the man suddenly dove underwater. Tony panicked, thinking the guy had collapsed. He rushed in, only to see the man resurface laughing. Apparently, he had a strange habit. He called it a curse, needing to stay in longer after a good sweat. Tony played along, silently respecting the man's dedication. Professionals like that didn't miss details. Before leaving, the man offered him simple advice: take care of your health while you're young. Then, with a quiet goodbye, he left. As Tony walked out, a suited man passed him and entered the sauna. He addressed the bathhouse boss, now revealed to be President Christopher, and reminded him of the closing ceremony starting in 40 minutes. Turns out, ever since the construction work ended, Christopher had been cursed. If he didn't take his daily bath here, something terrible always happened within the year. Whether real or imagined, this ritual meant survival. Finally, the day of the big interview arrived. Tony tried to stay cool, though tension twisted in his gut. The system whispered, "Just believe." But Tony wasn't convinced. "Believing doesn't get it done," he muttered, deciding to rely on himself instead. He greeted the panel politely and took a seat. His nerves buzzed. Directors like these weren't swayed by luck. He activated his skill again. One glowed blue, another purple. All looked like men in their 50s. Could these really be the ones deciding his future? Then one of them spoke. Tony had applied for a role in banking and finance, but he had no college degree. So how did he get this far? They asked to see the interview scores. Moments later, jaws dropped. Tony's results outshined even the country's top university grads. Then came a whisper, could he be in the SSS group? That elite group usually included powerful family members or rare individuals who had climbed their way up. Whatever the case, this guy had caught their attention. When they asked what role he wanted, Tony simply said he preferred office work, but he'd take whatever they gave him. He stared at the screen in disbelief. Was this some twisted joke? A game? Some hidden trick? The system had just offered to erase his memory, seriously? Tony quickly backed off, telling it not to take things so literally. The system didn't argue, but it threw a warning his way, choose your words carefully next time. That hit a nerve. Then came the mission, talk to his mom, tell her he got a new job. 6 points if he pulled it off, but skip it and a whole side quest would stay locked forever. Honestly, Tony had already planned to visit her. The timing just lined up. He walked into her hospital room. The smile on her face hit him harder than expected. She looked better, said she felt better, and he decided to share the good news. He told her he got a job at Elon Group. Her reaction? Pure joy. She beamed with pride, offered him apples, and finally seemed at peace. That moment, right there, it felt like a win. As he stepped out to find a nurse, the system chimed again. Quest complete. But then came the next bomb, call Uncle Hank and invite him to the hospital. 5 points on the line. No punishment. But the name of the quest? First Love. Tony froze. Uncle Hank? His dad's old friend? That same guy who used to nag his father about health? Tony's brain spun. Hank had never married. Could it be? He asked the system straight up. Was this real? Did Hank really love his mom? The system didn't deny it, and it never lied. It said this was all for Tony's success. That answer only made things more complicated. He returned to the room but couldn't shake the weird feeling. Something about his mother's tone when he mentioned Hank felt off. So he excused himself and made the call. Hank picked up, panicked the moment he heard Hannah's name, and rushed over without even changing out of his hospital gown. 15 minutes later, Hank burst into the room. It was the first time they'd seen each other since Tony's father passed. Tony watched quietly. The system rewarded him again, another 5 points. But he couldn't stop thinking, was his dad the one behind this system? The help, the pressure, the timing, it all felt personal. But when he asked, the system stayed silent. He peeked through the room window. His mom and Hank were talking. Smiling. And not just polite smiles, the kind that carried history. Pain. Maybe something new. Later that evening, visitors were asked to leave. Hank stepped out and found Tony standing outside. There was a flicker of awkwardness, like maybe he'd been caught listening in. But Tony played it cool. Hank thanked him, then turned to go. Before he left, Tony asked the one question that had been burning in his chest. Do you like her? Hank didn't answer clearly. Just looked away, unsure. That hesitation said a lot. But Tony didn't press. Instead, he told him where he'd be, the training center, for 3 days. He also left one quiet request, just visit her. Because deep down, Tony knew this wasn't just about friendship or favors. It was about her and who'd actually be there for her. He didn't wait for a promise. He just walked away knowing the choice wasn't his to make.